Dear Gen Z or young millennial, and new generations to come, it has always been your role to break through barriers of ancient conceptions that no longer serve humanity and society. It always requires sometimes kicking and screaming, but always being vigilant. That, in and of itself, is the way of nature, it's the way of humanity. It's okay, it's welcomed. However, that in the human biology has always been means to an end. Fighting something for the sake of a better world, meaning fighting something corrupt and evil to pave way for something good and better. It has become, though, a fashion instead of spiritual light warfare. See, when you go out to protest for the sake of protesting, you are not serving that role or that concept of making the world a better place through corruption. What you're doing is harnessing the credit of that, the virtue signaling of that. Because in essence, when you go out to protest, it is first and foremost because you know of something that is wrong, when putting an emphasis on know, not heard, not brainwashed to, but know from a place of critical thinking. And then protest and rebellion are the means to make things better and to change that which is wrong. But there seems to be an entire generation today that surface level seems to be operating based on that natural cycle of the younger generations coming in and clearing that which no longer serves society. And instead of that, instead of fixing what's wrong, taking what is wrong and emphasizing it. Because when you don't know what you're protesting for or protesting against, if you walk down the street, you see a protest and you automatically join it. If you hear a slogan and you automatically chant it and you don't do the due diligence of learning what it means and what it's based on and what it calls for. When you operate from a place of ego, of vanity, of wanting to be perceived by yourself and by your society as the freedom fighter, without actually knowing what it is you're fighting for or against, not only that you're not serving as that freedom fighter, as that young generation that is brave and breaks through the barriers, you're actually puppeteered by evil. Let's go back a little bit in history, not too long ago, just the last century, less than 100 years ago, Nazi Germany. The Nazi regime and Hitler had two very distinct parallel paths that worked together. There was the physical extermination, the concentration camps, the death camps, the gas chambers, and so on and so forth, the actual eradication of Jewish people. But before that, and during that, there was a completely different style of warfare taking place. A warfare no one was aware they are a part of, except, of course, for the Nazis. Joseph Goebbels was the head of the Nazi propaganda. That started at least a decade before the Holocaust itself. You had college professors, high school teachers, Community leaders, the media, especially the one that speaks to young people, tell the people all the bad things the Jews do. They would tell the people in all of these mediums that they rule the world, that they are planning to rule the world, that they are evil, that they are taking over. They've embedded deep into the people's psyche and mechanism that the Jews are an enemy, or at the very least, someone really, really bad. And that way, when the time came for the actual death camps and annihilation and genocide of the Jews, ever wondered how come people stood by and did nothing? Many of which thought, well, yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it's bad. Yeah, it's not ideal. But the Jews did do this and that. And the Jews are this and that. It's only just. It's only right. Today, the Jewish nation, aka Israel, is still, in reality, a minority in the world. Just like the Jews back then were a minority in Europe, and yet still people were told that they are this great enemy of civilization and of humanity, and they rule everything somehow. Today, the Jewish nation, Israel, is a minority amongst nations. Amongst countries, there are dozens of predominantly Christian countries, dozens of predominantly Muslim countries, only one predominantly Jewish state. That actually, historically and factually and archaeologically belongs to them. The Israelites, the Jewish people, are indigenous to Israel, to Judea, which, by the way, was the name of that region before Palestina, that was given to that region by a Roman emperor, has nothing to do with the Palestinian people of today who named themselves after that name. I won't go to the history of it because there's something bigger I want to talk to you about, and I'm taking this as an example. But just so you'd understand that, how in reality, the Jewish nation is a minority that over contributes. That's why you hear about us all the time, over contributing. That is constantly vilified, hence constantly on the news. But if there are billions of Christians and billions of Muslims and only 15 million Jews worldwide, the numbers speak louder than the propaganda. And yet, many of you out there, young people, college students, believe that Israel is the big bad wolf, the colonizer, the apartheid, the genocidal regime, the establishment that you need to break down. A genocide, by essence, by meaning, and hopefully you know this, means that from X amount of population, it gets significantly reduced by default. Right? If a population grows, it can't be genocide no matter how much you use that word. If a population is significantly reduced, like in the Holocaust, for example, Jews went from 18 million to 12 million in less than 6 years. That's genocide. Many, many Muslim nations in the past generations, especially in the past century, have actually ethnically cleansed Jews from their countries. There are a handful of Jewish people in most Muslim countries, and they went from hundreds of thousands to dozens of thousands to a handful. Numbers speak louder than propaganda. So many of you are now living in an upside-down world. The Palestinian population, for example, in complete opposition, went from about 700,000, 750,000 in the 1940s. The modern reestablishment of the State of Israel happened in 1948, right? So in the 1940s, there were about 700, 750,000 Palestinians. How many are there now? If there is genocide and ethnic cleansing by default, and that's not something you can dance around, by default, it means that the population must have been reduced since significantly, or at the very least a little bit. And yet today, and these are things you can verify, there are 6 to 7 million Palestinians within Gaza, the West Bank, and within Israel, those who also carry Israeli citizenship. And in case you're not familiar, Gaza is not a part of Israel. It's not a segregated neighborhood. It's like its own autonomy, just to be very, very clear, because I feel like that misconception that Gaza is a part of Israel somehow, it's like making people think that they're segregated. It's not. It's like saying that America is segregating Mexico because there's a border. There's a border because it's two different countries. There's also a border between Gaza and Egypt. And the barricade there is actually a lot tighter, but you never talk about that one. No one ever talks to you about that one. They only mention the barricade that Israel has. Interesting. Double standard has its own anti-Semitic element. Maybe we'll circle back to that later. So right now, many of your generation in America, in anyway, use terms like genocide and ethnic cleansing in relation to what Israel allegedly does to the Palestinian people, when on the ground and in reality, it's the absolute opposite, making it a complete lie. Now, a side note to those of you who are not familiar, and if you're not familiar, it means that something went amiss in your education. There's a thing called blood libel. It's when you vilify a Jew to such a degree where when the Jew blood gets spilled, it's just how it has to be because the Jew is this and that, and they did that. I mean, that's sad and that's bad, but that's what they did and that's what they are. So maybe it's justice. Never mind that beheading babies and burning them alive in their crib and executing families and torturing children and tying them up together and then burning them alive and executing Holocaust survivors, elderlies, and taking them to Gaza as hostages. Never mind that in and of itself is never justice, no matter what anyone does. Serial killers get better treatments. So many of you out there oppose death sentence to the worst atrocity committers. Some of you, if not many of you. And yet, when a Jew is allegedly evil, and even if we were, it somehow excuses getting beheaded, raped to a degree that the pelvis gets broken. Yeah, that means they used more than just their organs. Even if everything you thought that was bad about Israel was true, if you're somehow excusing it, that is being an extension of evil. But to make matters worse, none of it is true. Just go to Israel and see for yourself. Well, maybe not right now as I'm recording this because things are, as you know, dangerous. But in regular times, apartheid means that people of minorities or a certain group of people does not have any rights and that they're segregated, just like it was in South Africa. But comparing Israel to South Africa apartheid is insulting to those who actually suffered from apartheid, and it's anti-Semitic. As I said, blood libel, when you vilify the Jewish people to a degree where whatever is done to them is somehow justified. Because if it wasn't apartheid, I'd be there with you cheering against it. But it's not. And that makes all the difference in the world. If everyone has equal rights, except obviously for people that are from a different country that are not Israelis, aka the Palestinians. And to top it all, they also call for the annihilation of the Jewish nation. America doesn't give full rights to all Mexicans, and America doesn't give full rights to Canadians in its country. No, that's the other country's leadership job. It's so clear to you, it's so obvious to you. It's like, duh. But somehow when it comes to the Jewish nation, it's like your brain becomes a mush. What is that? That is brainwash. If you're smart and reasonable and clear about everything, except for the Jewish people, that's brainwash that is also anti-Semitic. And the most dangerous part about it is those of you who do that, who think like that, believe that you're on the right side because the minority is always good and the majority is always bad. Well, no, not always. There's a minority of psychopaths and serial killers that mean that they are right. There's a minority of billionaires in the world. Does that mean that they need to rule the world? Being a minority or being a majority is not an automatic definition to good versus evil. Being weak or being strong doesn't automatically determine who's weak, who's good, and who's evil. Leading a happy, privileged life versus leading a difficult, tragic life isn't automatically the definition of good versus evil. You know if something is good or something is evil case by case scenario. And you figure that out by using critical thinking. If you tear down, of course not most of you, but some of you, if you tear down images of kidnapped hostage babies that are held by a terrorist organization that beheads babies, and you tear their images down, that's evil. And you're part of a Nazi regime. If you claim that that never happened, you are in line with people who claim the Holocaust never happened. Not as an analogy, not as a metaphor, not kinda, not maybe, exactly. See, there's a reason why Hamas is being referred to as ISIS on steroids or as Nazis. They carry Nazi ideology and they enact it with ISIS methods on steroids. What was the Nazi ideology? To eradicate all Jews. And then you'll say, no, 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 they don't want to eradicate all Jews. They're just fighting for the freedom of their people. So you know so much, and yet you haven't bothered on reading the charter of Hamas, which is, by the way, written decades ago. The barricade on Gaza by Israel is about 20 plus years old. After Israel completely withdrew from Gaza and gave it complete autonomy, they had their own elections. They've elected Hamas. That was 18 years ago, 17, 18 years ago. Since then, they have not brought them down. Unlike the Iranian people who are fighting the Ayatollah and are being murdered in the streets for not wearing a hijab, you don't see much of that from the Palestinian people. Because when the charter of your leader writes black on white, it's not hidden, it's not something you need to dig, it's not something you need to discover. It's you can Google it. That's how available that information is. When the charter says clearly that their main aim is to eradicate Jews worldwide, and then they vote that in, what is that if not a culture of Nazi ideology? Now, are there Palestinians that resist that don't agree with that? Of course. They're either silent because they're terrified, or they're silent because they're terrified of other things. But unfortunately, a big, big, big portion of that people sides with Hamas actions. When the education minister of Gaza is an extension of Hamas, which means that the teachers of Gaza teach their children that Hitler was a hero, that they show them caricatures of how to stab a Jew. That's generation after generation that is being brought up to hate, that is brainwashed to be psychotic and absolutely anti-Semitic and Nazi-like. And when you excuse that, when you excuse those actions, first and foremost, it's evil to the Jewish people, to the Israeli people. And I'm purposefully using the word evil because being an extension of evil, even if you're puppeteered, even if you're maneuvered, even if you don't mean anything bad by it, it's still evil. Because if blood is spilled, if innocent blood is spilled, and you partook in it, the bottom line is what counts. And you're also not helping the people that you claim to care about, the Palestinians. You enable generation after generation of children being brought up to hate and to kill. What kind of a future does that leave them with? Worst case scenario, imprisoned or killed for enacting a terror attack. Good case scenario, living a life of being hateful and anti-Semitic and ignorant. That's your love for the Palestinian people? That's what you want for them? Not, say, healing and education and light in their heart? What do you actually care about? Do you care about sounding good as you chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free? Do you know what that means? The river is the east border of Israel, the river of Jordan, the border with Jordan. The sea is the Mediterranean Sea, the west border of Israel. From this border to this border, the entire border of Israel, from the river to the sea, it's a call for genocide of all Jewish people from Israel and taking over the entirety of Israel. Not a two-state solution, not coexistence, not freedom against oppression, allegedly, an actual genocide of Jews. You know, the thing you speak against or claim to speak against? What is it that you stand for? Do you stand for pretense or do you stand for truth? If you just chant and speak slogans, but you don't know what it means and they have no grasp in reality in the field, then you're lying. You're lying a lie that vilifies the Jews. That is anti Semitic. That is blood libel. Not kind of, not maybe, not sort of, but is. If you manage to refer to someone being misgendered as terrorism, but when a baby is beheaded or burned alive in their cribs, you call that resistance or freedom fighting. You lost your moral compass if you ever had any. Your spirit is hijacked. And you need to pull yourself with every ounce of strength that you have left in your soul and in your heart out of that dark pit of ignorance and hate camouflaged by woke appearance and virtue signaling. See, if the young generations align with evil, we're doomed. Because you're the ones who are supposed to see beyond that. You claim to see beyond that, but do you? Everyone needs to be heard except for your fellow Jewish students. Sorry, Israelis. Sorry, Zionists. Sorry, Jews. See, if you take all the slogans and the teachings against Israel and against Zionists, and you simply replace the word Zionist with a Jew or Israeli with a Jew, and you read it again or listen to it again, that's that's Hitler one-on-one for you. That's right there. And Middle Age anti-Semitism. The same tropes that have been perpetuating for generations, playing out differently in different culture and different continent and different time, is still the same thing. 2,000 years ago, the Jews were drinking Christian babies' blood. Now they are allegedly harvesting Palestinian children's organs, when in reality, Israel treats Palestinian children in its hospitals, healing them. If you've never stepped foot in Israel, if you've never stepped foot in Gaza, if you've never stepped foot in what you refer to as the West Bank, that's cultural appropriation. It's actually Judea and Samaria, where all Jews are born from. Judea, Jews, 4,000 years ago, yeah. And you just speak slogans and you don't verify the truth, you have an issue with Jews. And when you march out there not knowing what you're talking about, you're dangerous. You're not helpful. You're not brave. You're not resilient. You're not resisting. It's evil and it's dangerous. And the thing is, if it was only ignorant, we would let you be ignorant. You have the right to be ignorant. The thing is, when you do that, our blood is spilled. When you vilify Jews, we don't get offended or hurt or fired or canceled. We get murdered. If you screamed and ached at the bombing of the Palestinian hospital in Gaza that allegedly killed hundreds, that actually didn't happen by Israel, it was actually the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. You raged against Israel, but as soon as you found out that it's proven to not have been Israel, that it's been proven that it's the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and you didn't turn around and immediately cried against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, you don't care about Palestinian children. You care about using Palestinian to go against Jews. If you only talk about the barricade between Israel and Gaza, but not the barricade between Egypt and Gaza that is a lot tighter, you don't care about the Palestinians. You just use the Palestinians to attack Jews. If you only get mad when it's allegedly Israel that kills innocent people, but you don't get upset when the Palestinians murder innocent Israelis on purpose in the most torturous, brutal of ways, and then chant and cheer about it in the streets. You don't care about Palestinians. You care about using them to speak against Jews. I'm not anti-Semitic. You are what you do. You can change that. Maybe you've been this way until now. You cannot change what you've been. You can change what you are now and from here on. So there is no saving the fallen dignity of you if you've been like that. What there is, the only thing that there is to do is building a new ego, new dignity. To never again you're currently seeing yourself as a generation of justice while you are just a recycling, a repeat of Nazi Germany. This is how Germany looked like before the Holocaust, what's going on right now. Swastikas, Star of Davids marking Jewish establishments, Jewish people being attacked in the street. You have a problem with the Israeli government, you say, not with Jews? Oh, so how come Palestinian rallies and protests call to gas the Jews? How come they have swastikas waved? How come they attack and assault Jewish people on the streets worldwide? Are they the Israeli prime minister? Are they the IDF? Would you do that to a Chinese person? Would you be okay with the rally doing that to a Chinese person when the Chinese government actually enacts atrocities? Or to a Russian person, a random Russian person in the streets when the Russian government actually enacts atrocities? And so on and so forth. If you wouldn't do that to anyone, but you would do that to a Jew, if you wouldn't be okay about it when it comes to anyone else, but you're okay about it when it comes to a Jew, you're not a freedom fighter. You don't care about Palestinians. You care about hurting Jews. And right now, America is waking up. And you can either be a part of the process of wake up, or you can stick to your guns and fall along every other culture in the past that tried to eradicate the Jewish people. You can just join the list of many, many peoples who have tried to eradicate the Jews and be written in history just like that. This is the moment of truth where you get to decide. Now, right now. Not tomorrow, not next week. In this moment, yesterday. You don't have time to sit on the fence, to think about it, to ponder, to debate. You don't have time to be a weak coward that claims to be a brave fighter. You think misgendering is terrorism, but beheading babies is resistance? You're a sperm of Satan enacting its evil on earth, and you can change, but you need to make that decision because the world needs the young generation to be on the right side of history, not the wrong side of history. May your gods treat you the way you treat others, especially the Jewish people. Am Yisrael Chai.